So in other words, at the beginning it seems like you're fighting against the Illuminati, but in the end you're fighting against God. And Squall's girlfriend, the first woman who came to embrace him at the beginning of the game, Rinoa, well, she also turns out to be a sorceress, but she isn't evil because it's Hein who is making the sorceresses do evil things. The sorceress Idia also turns out to be a very nice woman later in the game. The very same sorceress that is shown as the main villain at the beginning of the game. So the sorceresses are actually good people. Only Hein is evil. As for the garden, which appears to be the Garden of Eden or Paradise, well, first of all, it turns out that a monster called Norg lives under the garden and actually rules over it. So the one who controls the garden or paradise is a monster. Of course, in reality, the Garden of Eden is controlled by God. But in this game, the garden is controlled by a monster and you have to kill him. So again, the subliminal message is that you must fight against God. Also, other bad things happen in the garden. For example, people get in trouble and get injured and even get killed inside the garden. The garden is attacked by monsters and even by an army who bomb it and destroy parts of it. All of this is done to make you subconsciously disbelieve in paradise. In other words, first the game tries to make you subconsciously identify Balam Garden with the Garden of Eden or Paradise. Then it slowly tries to show you that the garden is not perfect. So in other words, paradise isn't perfect. People can still be injured or killed in the garden. Then after you defend the garden from attacks, it starts to fly in the sky like a spaceship. So now the subliminal message is that the garden is a spaceship. In other words, don't expect paradise to be a perfect place, but paradise is simply a spaceship. We know that millions of people around the world claim to have been abducted by aliens. We Muslims believe that these aliens are actually the jinn and the shayateen. And the truth is that they can't abduct you unless you allow them to do it. In other words, they actually do it through deception and mind manipulation. We humans can actually overpower the devils, and many non-Muslim alien abductees have actually said that when they decided to confront the aliens, they found that they were very weak and fragile. So when a shaitan or devil or alien wants to abduct someone and bring them to their spaceship to rape them and molest them, the human has to allow this to happen. Otherwise, the jinn cannot overpower you. So, if you subconsciously think of this spaceship as paradise, then you are much more likely to allow the abduction to take place. So this is the reason why the garden turns out to have so many imperfections and turns into a spaceship. It is so that you would subconsciously think of spaceships as paradise, and at the same time you don't expect paradise to be perfect, which makes it more likely for you to accept the UFOs as paradise. There is also a card quest you can play in the garden. The cards are beautiful and interesting, but the players in the quest are named after real life gambling cards. For example, they are called Diamond, Club, Spade and Joker. So obviously the game is encouraging children to play with gambling cards in the future and to become gamblers. As I said earlier, Satan tries to use beauty and innocence to attract you towards darkness and evil and ugliness. The real card game in real life is very dull and a waste of time and money. The cards aren't even interesting or beautiful. But using art and beauty as a cover, Satan slowly attracts you towards lifelessness, apathy, and nihilism. For example, there are many songs in real life about love and romance, but people listen to these songs and become fans of the singers. And then the singer sings another song in support of lust and perversion. Or very often they even have that in that same love song itself, they have satanic and perverted subliminal messages. Also, very often these apparently romantic love songs are performed while the singer is dancing with a bunch of half-naked women. So for example, you see someone singing that he is in love and that he only loves one person and doesn't want any other woman or any other man, but at the same time the music video is zooming in on half-naked people, or the singer is touching his private parts while singing or doing some other perverted acts. So there is clearly a satanic agenda to encourage lust while apparently singing about love, loyalty and romance. So Satan gives you something that seems beautiful and which resonates with what you feel in your heart, but he only does this in order to bring you towards darkness. In Final Fantasy VIII, there are two love stories. Interestingly, they both involve the main characters that you control. At the beginning you control a Squall, and later when you enter the dream world, the main character is Laguna. So you, the player, actually associate yourself with Squall and Laguna. In other words, the game wants you to think of yourself as these two characters. Laguna's love story involves him being in love with a piano player, but he is ordered to leave that area by the army. He then moves to another area and marries a different woman. So in other words, he doesn't marry the woman that he was originally in love with. The other love story involves Squall and Rinoa. Rinoa is the woman who runs towards him at the beginning of the game. However, as I said earlier, she is actually Cypher's girlfriend. However, later she leaves Cypher and becomes a Squall's girlfriend. So what do these two love stories in Final Fantasy VIII have in common? They are both about ignoring the person that you've originally fallen in love with and instead having a relationship with whoever is near you. If you're really in love with someone, you don't care where you are or in what condition you're in. You only want to be with that person. However, people generally just have relationships with whoever happens to be near them. They marry or become girlfriend and boyfriend with someone just because he or she happens to go to the same university or college, or just because they happen to live in the same area or work in the same place, or who happen to know each other's friends who introduce them to each other. No offense, but animals also mate with whoever's in their path. The animal male goes to the nearest female he can find, and the mating begins just because they happen to be in the same forest. The concept of fitra that I explained earlier also involves true love or romantic love. We are not limited to our biological organs. True love comes from the soul, and lust comes from the biological body. And as I explained, when we are children, we are closer to our fitra because we have not yet been corrupted by false teachings and subliminal messages. Hence, the person that you originally fall in love with is most likely the person you're supposed to marry in accordance with your fitra. Remember that we are talking about love and not lust. And when you're younger, you're obviously more likely to be in love than lust, especially before puberty. However, Satan tries to separate you from the one you love so that you'll end up marrying someone else. If you do, it becomes far more likely for you to have an unsuccessful marriage or even cheat on your wife or husband. Aside from that, the person who tries to seduce you or deceive you into marrying them could be a munafiq or a shaitan. So he or she may use that relationship to control your life and corrupt you. For example, this is how some men end up joining the army. They marry a devil or an evil woman who is secretly a Satanist, and then she prevents you from doing what Allah wants you to do in your life. She prevents you from fulfilling your fitrah. and instead may encourage you, for example, to join the army and fight against Satan's enemies or to kill children. So anyway, the fact that in Final Fantasy VIII both love stories involve leaving the person that you originally were in love with goes to show that there was an agenda behind this. Interestingly, this concept of true love exists in Kabbalist Judaism. They use the term soulmate to describe it. However, the Kabbalists say that your soulmate can change. In other words, you have one specific soulmate who can be your ideal wife or husband, but the Kabbalists say that their pantheistic God sometimes changes your soulmate. So you were supposed to marry one person, but now you must marry someone else. The excuse that the Kabbalists use is that they say that this happens because it is difficult for God to bring soulmates together. And the Jews say the hand of Allah is tied up. Their hands shall be shackled, and they shall be cursed for what they say. Nay, both his hands are spread out. He expands as he pleases, and what has been revealed to you from your Lord will certainly make many of them increase in transgression and kufr. Often Jewish rabbis actually act as matchmakers, where they determine who their followers are supposed to marry. I've actually seen Sufi clerics doing the same thing. So the Kabbalists encourage people to marry against their will, using the excuse that your soulmate was changed because God failed to bring you together with your original soulmate. So Final Fantasy VIII is encouraging the same conformist lifestyle as the Kabbalists. And as I have explained on my past videos, the Illuminati are also Kabbalists, and the Kabbalah actually originates from paganism. Also notice that Laguna's story ends in marriage and Squall's story ends with him having a girlfriend. So you're given two deceptive paths: to have relations outside of marriage, which is a major sin, or to marry the wrong person, which is also a major sin, although many Muslims today don't know about this. I don't want to go into much more detail about this on this video, but to put it simply, if you have Iman, you will follow your fitrah, and if you follow your fitrah, you will marry the right person. A man who marries the wrong woman is like a man who pledges allegiance to the wrong imam. In both cases, it appears as though he is a righteous Muslim, but in reality, he is headed directly for hell, because by obeying an evil imam and living with an evil wife, he would eventually commit evil actions. Of course, divorce is allowed in Islam in case you made the wrong choice in marriage, so it's never too late to get out of the trap if your wife or husband turns out to be a devil or a devil worshipper.